In the quiet corners of history, where maps fade and names turn to dust, lie the ghosts of forgotten kingdoms. These are the realms erased by time, their stories buried beneath centuries of silence and soil. We speak of one such place tonight, the kingdom of Valoria, a name now carried only by the wind that howls through its skeletal ruins. At its heart was a throne not of gold or silver, but one that would earn a darker name, a throne of bones. This is not a tale of glory or triumph. It is a story of how a crown, gleaming with promise, became a vessel for poison, how a family became a casualty of ambition, and how a kingdom built on hope was devoured by the very shadows it sought to conquer. The stones of this dead palace do not remember songs or celebrations. They remember only the weight of betrayal, the chill of death, and the final, unheard screams of a king, a queen, and a princess, all lost to the unforgiving march of history. Their tragedy is a testament to a brutal truth, that the brightest crowns often cast the darkest, most consuming shadows. Before the silence there was a roar. It was the roar of King Thuron, a man who clawed his way to power from the mud and blood of the borderlands. He was not born to rule, he took his destiny by the throat. The old king was weak, the kingdom fractured and bleeding from internal strife. Thuron emerged as a savior, a warlord of unparalleled charisma and ruthless efficiency. His victories were swift, his justice absolute. The people, starved for strength, did not see the cruelty in his eyes. They saw only the promise of order. They cheered as he marched into the capital, his banners blotting out the sun. He ascended the ancient throne, vowing to forge a new era of prosperity from the ashes of the old. But the foundations of his rule were not laid with honor. They were cemented with the blood of his rivals and the secrets he buried deep beneath the palace stones. He was a king forged in fire, but the very flames that created him would one day be his undoing and his kingdom's pyre. The crown felt heavy on his brow, not with the weight of duty, but with the ghosts of those he had crushed to obtain it. To solidify his reign, King Thuron required a queen, not for love but for legitimacy. He found her in Seraphina, a princess from a conquered southern land, renowned for her startling beauty and quiet wisdom. Her arrival was a spectacle of calculated grandeur. She moved through the court like a phantom of grace, her silk gowns whispering against the cold stone floors. She was the kingdom's jewel, a symbol of the peace Thuron's conquest had supposedly brought. But for Seraphina, the palace was not a home, it was a gilded cage. In public she was the perfect queen, her smile a flawless mask of contentment. But in private, away from the prying eyes of the court, a deep and unshakable sorrow haunted her. She saw the darkness coiling behind her husband's ambitions, the fear in the eyes of his counselors. She was a political prisoner, bound by a golden crown and a loveless marriage, destined to watch a tragedy unfold from the very heart of the storm. Her presence brought a fragile light to the grim court, but it was a light that would soon be brutally extinguished. In the second year of their hollow union, a princess was born. They named her Lyra, and for a fleeting moment she was a symbol of pure, untainted hope. Her laughter, a sound as delicate as spun glass, echoed through the stone corridors that had grown accustomed to the silence of fear. To the kingdom, Princess Lyra was a promise of continuity, a future for the dynasty King Thuron was so desperate to build. The king saw in her his legacy, another piece on the great board of power, a future bride to be bartered for an alliance. The queen, however, saw something far different. She saw a fragile soul born into a nest of vipers. She held her daughter close, praying to forgotten gods that the innocence in Lyra's eyes would never be shattered by the political machinations and dark secrets that festered within the palace walls. She prayed that her daughter would be spared the fate she herself endured. But fate, in the kingdom of Valoria, was not a kind mistress. Lyra was the last beautiful flower to bloom in a dying garden, destined to be trampled underfoot when the wolves finally came to the gates. Hope is a fragile thing, easily smothered. As Princess Lyra grew, so too did the shadows that clung to the palace walls. The court of King Thuron was not a place of loyalty, but of silent, shifting allegiances. Envy was a currency, and betrayal was a weapon wielded in hushed tones behind heavy tapestries. Lords who had once supported Thuron's rise now saw a tyrant in the making, their own ambitions stirring like serpents. Whispers followed the queen like a second shadow. Rumors of her southern heritage and her quiet melancholy spun into tales of disloyalty. The king, consumed by the preservation of his power, saw daggers in every friendly smile and poison in every cup of wine. The grand palace, once a symbol of his strength, became his prison. He trusted no one. Guards were doubled, food tasters employed, and spies were placed in every noble house. The air grew thick with paranoia, a suffocating tension that seeped into the very stones, turning a home into a tomb waiting for its occupants. The royal family was at the center of this web, unaware that every thread was pulling them closer to a violent, inescapable end. A kingdom was not enough. For King Thuron, power was a hunger that could never be sated. His initial desire to secure his borders warped into an insatiable lust for conquest. He dreamt of an empire, his name etched into history as a titan among men. This obsession became a sickness, draining the kingdom's coffers and its spirit. He levied crippling taxes to fund his endless wars, turning fields of wheat into fields of widows. Sons were torn from their families, marched to die under foreign suns for a king's vanity. Thuron no longer listened to his advisors. Their counsel was but the buzzing of flies to him. He spent his nights locked away, poring over maps, his world shrinking until it contained nothing but territories to claim and enemies to crush. His love for his people had rotted into a demand for their absolute submission. He was no longer the hero who had saved them. He had become the monster from whom they needed saving. And in his relentless pursuit of a legacy written in blood, he failed to see the rot that was consuming his own kingdom from within. While the king waged his wars abroad, Queen Seraphina fought a silent battle within the palace walls. Her loneliness was a physical presence, a constant companion in the opulent, empty rooms. She was a ghost in her own life, her days a monotonous cycle of public appearances and private despair. Her pain was a secret she dared not share, for in Thuron's court, vulnerability was a death sentence. She watched her husband transform from a man she respected into a paranoid tyrant she feared. She saw the hunger in the eyes of the court nobles and the growing resentment among the servants. More than anyone, she understood the terrible secret upon which the kingdom was built, a truth she had been forced to carry since her wedding day. This knowledge was her heaviest burden, a poison she swallowed with every breath. Her tears were her only solace, shed in the dead of night when the only witness was the cold, indifferent moon. She mourned not just for herself, but for her daughter, the innocent Princess Lyra, and for the kingdom she knew was doomed to drown in a sea of blood. Princess Lyra grew up in a world of beautiful lies. She was surrounded by luxury, silken dresses, priceless jewels, and manicured gardens, but she was starved of genuine affection. Her father, the king, was a distant, imposing figure, his presence more of a threat than a comfort. Her mother, the queen, loved her fiercely, but her love was tainted with a deep, pervasive sadness that the young princess could not understand. Lyra was a pawn, her every move dictated by the needs of the state. Her tutors taught her history and diplomacy, but they were really teaching her the art of survival in a treacherous court. Her destiny was already written for her. She would be married off to a foreign prince, her life a bargaining chip to secure an alliance for her father's endless wars. She was a bird with gilded wings, never allowed to fly. She sensed the tension that coiled beneath the surface of palace life, the unspoken fears and hidden hatreds. Her innocence was a flickering candle in a hurricane, a fragile light about to be swallowed by the all-consuming darkness of her family's legacy. Every throne built on lies will eventually crumble. The forbidden secret of King Thuron's reign was a truth so dark it had the power to unravel the very fabric of the kingdom. It was not a tale of simple conquest, it was a story of fratricide. The previous king, Thuron's elder brother, had not died of a sudden illness as the official histories claimed. He had been murdered, poisoned by his own ambitious sibling. Thuron had not liberated the kingdom, he had stolen it. And Queen Seraphina. She had been his brother's betrothed. She was taken as a prize, a living symbol of Thuron's ultimate victory, forced to marry her beloved's killer. This was the truth she carried, the source of her unending sorrow. The secret was kept for years, buried under fear and threats, but secrets, like bodies, have a way of rising to the surface. A dying court physician, his conscience a final, unbearable torment, confessed everything to a lord whose family Thuron had destroyed. The truth was now a lit torch, and the kingdom was a tinderbox waiting for the spark. When the secret was unleashed, it spread through Valoria like a plague. The people, already broken by Thuron's wars and taxes, learned that their savior was a kinslayer and a usurper. The simmering resentment exploded into open rebellion. Lords who had long chafed under Thuron's iron fist now had a righteous cause to rally behind. Civil war erupted, tearing the kingdom apart. The fields that once grew crops now soaked up the blood of farmers and soldiers alike. The rebellion was not a single, organized army. It was a furious, desperate tide of humanity crashing against the palace walls. Thuron, trapped within his fortress of paranoia, was utterly unprepared. He had spent years looking for enemies beyond his borders, never realizing the greatest threat was the hatred he had cultivated within his own home. The cheers that had once welcomed him into the city had now become a bloodthirsty roar demanding his head. The fall was swift, brutal, and absolute. The kingdom was tearing itself apart, and the royal family was trapped at the epicenter of its violent death throes. In the final, desperate hours, as the sounds of battle echoed through the palace, King Thuron's mind finally shattered. Consumed by rage and paranoia, he saw betrayal in every shadow, and his gaze fell upon his wife, Queen Seraphina. In his madness, he did not see the woman who had suffered in silence for years. He saw the living embodiment of the secret that had destroyed him, the woman who had loved the brother he murdered. He accused her of conspiring with the rebels, her sorrowful silence a confession in his eyes. Her pleas for reason were lost in the cacophony of his delusions. In a final, unforgivable act of cruelty, the king who had taken everything from her now took her life. She died not by an enemy's blade, but by her husband, on the cold marble floor of the throne room. Her last breath was a quiet, shuddering release from a life of gilded misery. Her death was not the noble sacrifice of a queen. It was the final, tragic testament to the king's complete and utter monstrosity. When the rebels finally breached the throne room, they did not find a mighty king, but a broken man standing over his wife's cooling body, lost in a world of his own making. The fight had gone out of him. His empire of ambition had shrunk to this single, blood-stained room. There was no grand final stand, no heroic last words. He was simply disarmed and dragged from his palace in chains, forced to witness the hatred in the faces of the people he once ruled. His execution was a public spectacle. He was taken to the Grand Plaza, the very place where he had been crowned, and there, before the cheering mobs, he was beheaded. His death was not a martyr's end. It was squalid, pathetic, and unlamented. As his head fell, there was no sense of justice, only the grim finality of a bloody chapter closing. The man who wanted to carve his name across the world was now just another corpse, his legacy not one of empire, but of ruin, murder, and utter failure. And what of the innocent? What of Princess Lyra? Her fate was perhaps the most cruel of all. To the new lords of Valoria she was a dangerous symbol, the last of the usurper's bloodline. A public execution would make her a martyr, a potential rallying cry for loyalists. So they chose a punishment worse than a quick death. They chose erasure. Princess Lyra was taken from her chambers in the dead of night and locked away in the highest room of the most remote, forgotten tower in the kingdom. Her name was struck from all records. She was left to live out her days in total isolation with only the wind for company. No one knows how long she survived. Did she wither from grief? Did she stare out that tiny window year after year until her mind broke? Or did she simply fade away, a ghost long before she was a corpse? Her end was silence. She vanished not at dawn, but from history itself, a final, unheard whisper in the grand, brutal opera of her family's destruction. Her story had no end, because, to the world, it never even began. The fall of King Thuron did not bring peace to Valoria. It brought only a new set of masters just as greedy and ruthless as the last. The kingdom remained fractured, a land of squabbling warlords fighting over the scraps of a broken legacy. The grand palace was looted and abandoned, its treasures stripped, its halls left to the rats and the rain. The throne, the seat of so much ambition and so much pain, was left to decay. In time, the kingdom itself dissolved, its name lost as its lands were absorbed by its neighbors. The story of Thuron, Seraphina, and Lyra was intentionally forgotten, a shameful memory that the new rulers wanted buried. Valoria became a ghost story, a cautionary tale whispered by old women in nearby villages. The throne of bones was no longer a metaphor. It was a literal description of the ruin and death that was the kingdom's only lasting monument. All that remained was silence, and the hollow wind blowing through the bones of a dead kingdom. In the end, what is a kingdom? It is not stone walls or golden crowns. It is a story, an idea held in the hearts of its people. When that story is poisoned by lies and drenched in blood, the kingdom is already dead. It is merely waiting to be buried. The tragic tale of Valoria is a stark reminder that ambition, when untethered from humanity, is a ravenous beast that devours everything in its path: family, loyalty, and love. King Thuron sought to build an eternal legacy, but he built only a tomb. Queen Seraphina sought peace but found only a gilded cage. And Princess Lyra, a symbol of hope, became a forgotten sacrifice to a history that has no room for the innocent. Their ghosts do not haunt these ruins. Their ghosts are the silence itself, a permanent echo of the price of power. The throne of bones stands as their only headstone, a grim warning that history is not written by the victors, but by the survivors, and sometimes there are none. History bleeds, and its echoes are written in the cries of kings, queens, and lost princesses. This was the Fear Room. Don't forget to subscribe and like for more dark history tales.